I'll be talking about minimizing errors in ICU. This is something which we regularly do, not the minimization, the errors part, and we generally don't acknowledge them. Now, I put my colleague's name, Dr. Vandana Agarwal, because a couple of years back we realized that we were working haphazardly. We did not have a systematic way of reducing errors. We did not know what events are happening, and we instituted something called as critical incident reporting system. And I put some of our data into this talk. So I'll be talking about the terminology of errors, what is the incidence, what are the theories of error and how you can prevent error, and I will show some of our data. Then why we should disclose errors, and then some conclusions. So medical error is the failure of planned action to be completed as intended, and then this can lead to either a near miss or a preventable adverse event. Near miss is an event where something might have gone wrong, but fortunately for you and for the patient hasn't gone wrong. Adverse event is defined as an injury caused to the patient by medical management. So the patient did not commit this injury, and it is we did something and it led to a problem for the patient. So the adverse events can be divided into two types: those which are preventable due to error. So either you have omitted to do something, or you have committed an error and the patient came to harm, or unpreventable, which cannot be prevented given current state of knowledge at present. So you can have slips and mistakes and active or latent errors. Mistake can be incorrect plan or deviation from the intended plan, or you can omit to do something, you forgot to do something, and this will be something which will be called negligence. And then you have preventable adverse events and adverse events. Now, in our study we use this scale. So the errors can range from none to insignificant, which means no harm came to a person, to catastrophic. Fortunately, we haven't had this one. Permanent or long-term harm or injury to many people and multiple deaths. But we did have major and moderate problems. Now, why do errors occur? It might be because systemic conditions are favorable for generation of active errors. You are short staffed, you have nursing ratio of 1:3, nurse is doing something for a third patient, the first patient self-estimates. So that's a systemic condition, fatigue, stress, etc., which can lead to generation of errors. You can have human errors. You forgot to do something, you didn't think of this thing, or you gave the wrong dose, you wrote the wrong prescription, you gave blood to the wrong patient. I mean, this has happened once in our unit. There were two patients named Sharma, and blood was given to the wrong Sharma. Fortunately, he survived and did not come to a permanent harm. But that is something that we can do. Now, the incidence of medical error is fairly high, and because we don't look for the errors, we don't find them. So it's the 8th leading cause of death in the United States, and it's a very, very costly matter. $30 billion, almost Vikram Raja. Then there was this study which was published from Harvard. They looked at 30,000 patients, and what they found was most important part is that 58% of the adverse events were preventable. Out of which 28 were due to negligence, 17% were the surgical adverse events, and 37% were non-surgical adverse events. 3% out of 30,000, just imagine what the number is, caused permanent disability to the patient, and 14% nearly caused patient death. So there is something, and this is probably a tip of the iceberg. If we want to do a retrospective review, I am sure we can't even get the data in India, in our institutes. So that is something which is very, very regrettable. Now, sentinel event is an unexpected occurrence, and this is something which actually wakes you up. The patient suddenly died because he self-extubated and there was nobody. There was a death in our unit 3 years back. Now we have an isolation room, in which we keep febrile neutral patients. This patient was getting ventilated. His tube got disconnected. There was no nurse inside the room. You can't see him in the room because it's a cubicle. And this patient was found trying to climb over the railing to connect the ventilator back to himself, and then he arrested. Fortunately, somebody noticed who was walking by, but by the time we could actually resuscitate this patient, they the brain damage had already occurred and ultimately the patient died. So after that, with the strict order, now this shouldn't have happened in the first place, but this woke us to the fact that there has to be somebody at all the time inside that room. So if the nurse is not there, she or a doctor, she stand there, and then only she will go out. The commonest medical errors are medication errors, and I'm sure all of us have seen that. So we can have various stages of medication order cycle from the time we prescribe to the moment it is administered to the patient. So ordering can be wrong, transcribing the order can be wrong, filling or dispensing the medication order can be wrong. The pharmacist can give you the wrong medicine, or the nurse might give the wrong medication. There was a child in our unit who was supposed to be on colistin. The medical oncologist wrote the order for 100,000 units of colistin. The nurse gave 1 million units of colistin. So it's a problem in the administration. So most errors occur at the stage of ordering, which means us. Doesn't make me feel very good. 6% from transcribing order, and you can prevent this by having an electronic prescription system. 34% happens at the time of administration. Once a patient was given IV prescription, IV medication into the arterial line. Fortunately, nothing happened to the patient, but after that we realized that there should be no stopcock. The 10 centimeter stopcock that comes with a disposable transducer. So in our unit we don't use the 10 centimeter bimod, and we will have a separate label saying arterial line, do not inject, and the transducer is kept away from all IV accesses. So that thing does not happen. You can learn from the aviation industry that the aviation industry has realized long ago that small slips and lapses tend to accumulate, and one error is sufficient to avoid a tragedy. So if you can recognize one error out of these 6 errors, you can prevent the tragedy. Because there are multiple pages at multiple stages involved, if somebody at some stage says something is not going right, but he does not respond to that gut feeling that I feel something is not right, then there can be a potential catastrophe. Now errors can't occur if you have a system, and the Swiss cheese theory says that unless the holes are all aligned, you can't pass a wire or thread through that. So you can have variety of differences between the patient and potential adverse events, such as policies and procedures, professionalism of the team, teamwork, environment, individual, an intelligent individual who is awake and alert at the end of the shift, and you can have equipment which might protect the patient. If all these are overcome because of lack of procedure, lack of punitive policies, mixed messages given to the caretakers, pressures of production, and not for us, they are not production pressures, but for us they are work pressures, clumsy technology, insufficient training, and lots of distraction, as Dr. Maher was referring to earlier, and we keep deferring the maintenance. We will get the ventilator service later because we don't have another ventilator. There's too much pressure, too many patients, can't keep one bed vacant. You defer the maintenance and you will have a problem. One of our ventilators did not give an apnea alarm, and now somebody had forgotten to switch the apnea backup on. We realized that the patient developed bradycardia. Somebody ran to the bed and started ventilating the patient with ambu bag. So that is something which is very funny. We got the ventilator service later. So that was a sentinel event which woke us to the fact that we cannot defer maintenance. So we have now started doing regular maintenance. So how do you prevent the patient from coming to harm because of errors? You can have policies in writing, you can train our staff, you can standardize and simplify things, you can employ automation in many things, you can improve the devices and the architecture. Now, for example, you can have barcode readers, you can have, this is something which many people will not recognize in the audience, only the anesthetists will, these are keyed fillers for inhalation agents that are used for anesthesia. So you cannot use isoflurane filler for something like ceoflurane. So the vaporizer will not accept it. So this will automatically prevent giving of wrong medication. You can have needles which retract inside the syringe. You can have systemic architecture where if you are looking at a chest X-ray, the photograph of the patient will come up next to it. So then you will not put a chest drain in the wrong patient. Now this is some of our data. We implemented this service in Feb 2008. Before implementation, Vandana trained all of them about how to write a critical incident report, and then we categorized the incidents as none to catastrophic. And once the incidents were reported, somebody investigated those reports, those incidents. Then we have a risk management team consisting of the head of the department and 3 others. So we discuss these incidents and then we take a smart decision, which means specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and T is time for implementation. And a person is given responsibility to see to it that it is done. For example, we had a patient who had arrhythmia. The doctor there wanted diltiazem. Now we have these crash cards which are placed in all rooms. So the first impulse of anybody when the doctor shouts at the nurse, "Get me diltiazem," is to open the drawer, take out the diltiazem ampoule and give it to him. Now this crash card goes to an incident where there was a code and the person needed a cortisol and it was not there because it was removed earlier by somebody else. Okay, so we woke up. Now there is supposed to be a checklist at each crash card whether the drugs were filled there or not. And when the nurse was asked that did you physically check whether the drug was there, she said, "No, I just ticked the checklist." So having a tick checklist is no good. So now what we have done, we have started sealing the crash card. So they cannot remove, and the person who opens the seal has to sign that they have filled in the crash card again after using whatever was inside the crash card, and has to sign again in legible handwriting so that you can identify that person. So in this period, 50 incidents were reported, and then you classify the incidents as how likely they are likely to recur again. So almost certain is a very small number, fortunately, but 38% were possible that they will occur again, and you have to guard against such events. The incidents were related to either equipment, medication, device, and others. Most of the incidents did not require treatment, but some of them did. And then you identify the system factors which caused the incident and how severe the incidents were. So you realize from here that individual provider, lack of training, lack of communication caused a maximum number of incidents. Working conditions again caused the maximum number of incidents. So then you analyze this data, you go back to, so what we do is after we have taken action in the monthly meeting, then we give feedback to the providers. So we communicate to the nurses, we communicate to the surgeons, we communicate to the primary unit, we communicate to our staff that such and such thing is happening, please guard against it. And hopefully in couple of years I can give you data about whether that has led to an improvement in conditions. Now why do people hesitate to report the errors? First is that they are not sure what to do or report or disclose. They may not understand the legal and institutional definitions of error. In India, we have a big concern about litigation, so we want to hide things. We don't want to be straightforward about these things. We are uncomfortable about discussing such issues, and we generally want to avoid because we think that we will be blamed. We may believe that the disclosure will degrade patient's trust in the physician. And actually, we should be disclosing these errors to the patient because it actually sometimes strengthens the doctor-patient relationship, because the patient and family might feel that it's better to hear from you now than later on from somebody, and then there is a misunderstanding and the exact thing that you want to avoid, litigation, is what it leads to. It helps to establish a culture of responsibility that I am responsible for my errors. It is more easily defendable from a legal viewpoint and cheaper than a lawyer. Give others evidence of latent errors that may be corrected, hopefully, and it will improve the system. Improves emotional well-being of the physician. Once you get it off your chest, you feel better. And it can be important to your patient's future health care.
Your
So,
time, Dr. Kulkarni.
yes, and
Time
last
is
slide.
okay.
So you should disclose fully what the error was, and you should say that you regret that patient suffered because of the error. You must tell them that this reason for the error occurred. So to conclude, all adverse events may not be because of error, but many of them are preventable. Individual mistakes are symptom of the problem, and like you search for a root cause of sepsis and try to treat that infection instead of just treating the symptoms, we should do the same thing. We should find out why the errors have occurred and then try to prevent them. We should not perpetuate a culture of blame. So somebody comes back and honestly tells you that he has committed an error, don't blast him. Tell him that to err is human and to forgive divine. Learn from your mistakes and the mistakes of others, hopefully more from the mistakes of others. Ask for help when you need it, and disclosure should be the standard of care. An apology or explanation is cheaper than a lawyer. I leave you with that thought, and I hope you don't need a lawyer. Thank you very much for a patient hearing.